I'm author Paul Rushworth-Brown, author of Skullduggery, Red Winter Journey, and Dream of Courage. And today we'll be interviewing Sara Powter, who has written a wonderful Australian fictional novel called Convict: Shadows of the Past. And from what I understand, Sara has some amazing stories about some of her convict ancestors.
I do, yes.
So,
My husband and I have 7 between us, and all of my books are inspired by some of the stories that we've discovered while doing some family history, including this one.
Okay, so where did all that information come from?
I started getting interested in family history when I was 8, and it actually comes into this book. The first little chapter is almost my own story. When my grandfather came to live with us for 3 months, and I was not impressed that an old man was coming to live with us, as an 8-year-old sort of was like that. I cleared off until the first morning tea, and he started talking about bushrangers and convicts and Cobb and Co. And I was hooked from then on about learning about Australian history.
So yeah, there's an interesting parallel there. You're writing about Australian historical fiction. I write about English historical fiction.
Well, mine sort of like, there's a lot of English in it, of course, because of course the convicts were mostly from Britain. Or I say mostly because there were actually some non-British convicts. But I've tied in some of the stories that I've learnt from the family history, that, like this Convict: Shadows of the Past. Mum's side were Cornish dairy people, but they weren't convicts. But I wanted to tell the dairy story of Parramatta and the history of cheese in the colony. So I've tied the family history in with the actual novels. So
okay, wonderful. So yeah, just tell us a little bit more about the story.
Well, this particular one is a dual time one. And as I say, it starts off with a child at 8 learning about her ancestry, and that she discovers she was named after her great-great-grandmother, but they knew nothing about it, and there were whispers that she was a convict. So the next chapter is the convict as a child, and so there's 200 years apart, and slowly the stories come together as it works through until you actually get the answers in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it must be I mean, for me, it was an amazing. It was a journey.
But it was the military that caused the problems out here, not the actual governors or the edicts. So I'm trying to set history straight by actually going into their personal journals and things and accessing first-hand information.
Wonderful.
So they're factual.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you think about it, I mean, Australian police, and if you look at sort of like Ned Kelly and Australian police, and obviously the British soldiers that came over with the convicts. I mean, generally they don't seem to have a very good reputation, do they?
The first lot that came out were actual proper soldiers.
Yeah.
And Bonaparte and the Napoleonic Wars happened, and most of those went back to fight in the Napoleonic Wars.
Right.
But a lot of the military that came out after that, some of them were pulled petty criminals from jail to come out here to actually guard the convicts.
Yeah.
They were convicts guarding convicts, and of course they had the morals to boot and the ethics to boot as well. So they were crooks. But in amongst them, you've got, with the aristocracy in England, as you would know, if you've got more than one son, the oldest son inherits everything.
Yeah.
Second, third, and fourth sons go into the army, the church, or the law. So some of the hierarchy of the military that came out were actually dukes, earls, and whatever's sons, but they were second and third sons. So you've got this huge disparity in military. You've got the scum and you've got the cream, and there's nothing in the middle.
Yeah, and I mean, like I suppose, my novels are always described as being a little bit gritty, right? And I mean, the thing is that 85. They've done the research, and 85% to Western civilization actually came from the peasants.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right, and they were a rough lot.
They were, but there's the other 15%, and my stories are about them. They're the ones.
Okay.
Mine are all the clean ones. Yeah. But my family, they came out like I had my first one that came out was Third Fleet, and the last one that came out was Steve's great great grandfather, and he was a Scotsman who came out in 1838. Got done for passing a dud check buying grog in Glasgow. But they're all petty criminals.
Yeah.
But when you think there was no social security, there was no support for anything for peasantry.
Yeah.
If the women didn't have family, they had no option but to go into prostitution. There was nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, with this last book, The Convict Shadows of the Past, being a dairy girl, I wanted to tell each of my stories. I try and take an aspect of culture in our country and expand on that. So,
and I mean, you've written something like an enormous amount of books, haven't you?
Well, this one's my 14th out.
Yeah.
I've got 10 more in the queue.
Right. Okay.
I'm actually in the middle of writing number 24 at the moment.
Yeah. I wrote 3, and that was enough. I must explain about my virtual background here. So this is actually my lounge room, and the reason why my lounge room is a virtual background was because when I was asked to do Author of the Week by Beth Worsdale in the US, I said what I'll do is I'll bring the people that are watching into my home. But also as part of the project, I'm also going to show them around Sydney, show them the Opera House, go for a walk through the botanical gardens, and that'll all be part of it. Yeah. The purple shirt and the leather jacket. We're going to a party. So anyway, let's ask your first question.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
What does literary success look like to you?
I'm not in it for the money, although I'd like it to be in profit. I'm not far off it, but if I can correct people's history of what they know about Australia or what they understand about Australia, then I feel as though I've achieved something. There are so many untruths.
I mean, I originally started writing, as I said, just to give my children some sort of idea of their roots and where they came from. And my ancestors were actually called clodhoppers because they spent so much time in the dirt with animals and all that type of thing. Yeah. And the elite used to call them clodhoppers as well.
Yeah.
And, I mean, one thing led to another, and I thought, who was this Thomas Rushworth? How did he live in 1590 on the moors of Yorkshire, especially in wintertime? And so that was the beginning of Skullduggery. Anyway, more about you and less about me. Third question: do you read your book reviews? How do you deal with bad or good ones?
Well, I do read them. I actually joined the Brian Cohen ad school, and I sort of was getting hung up on them at first. And they said, no, what you've got to do with a book review is glean the information from it. So I've had, I think my worst one, and now mine are Christian historical fiction. So my worst book review is a 1-star that says this book has too much God in it. They're Christian historical fiction. So to me, that's a win.
Okay, so Sarah, what was your hardest scene to write?
I'll give you a little bit of background before I do that. We went down to the Parramatta Female Factory on a couple of times, and I got some statistics from there of the 20-odd thousand convict women that came out. And I asked how many of those possibly would have been raped. And they looked at me quite honestly and said, oh, at least 80% of them. And I said, what? And they said, well, firstly, rape was not against the law. And I said, what? And they said, no, it was common that the women it was just part of life for them. They were called abused, but rape it wasn't even a word. They
Just before you go on, just for our American audience, just explain what the female factory.
Okay, but it was called the factory because it was an industry. They had weaving looms, they had spinning, they had also what they called oakum picking, so that was pulling the old ship's ropes apart so that they could use it for packing in the decks of the ships to re-waterproof them. They had all sorts of industry, so they called it the female factory. But what was built for 300 ended up by housing 2,000 women.
That's incredible.
So, yeah,
Okay, so last question.
getting on, answering the question with that, the hardest scene is actually to write the rape scenes.
So I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing some of your ancestral stories.
Yeah.
And we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Thanks so much, Paul.